So welcome. This is the Altura Academy Boot Camp. I went to the Air Force Academy. They had something called Basic Cadet Training, and that's the place in which you sort of first learn the basics of what you need to survive at the Air Force Academy. That includes marching, how to tie your shoes, how to put on the uniform, how to make your bed, all of the things that are important for a cadet just entering the Air Force. This is a little bit similar to that, without all the yelling and marching around. And it's basically what are the foundations to persuasion. And I've created a masterclass called Tracing Success Patterns. We'll get into why I call it that in a little bit. But some of the things that we'll be talking about are drawn from Cialdini's book, Influence the Psychology of Persuasion. That's it's kind of the Bible when it comes to persuasion, and he talks about these different persuasion techniques that are shown on the screen, 1 through 7. And at the end of the whole presentation, if you're interested in having a more complete version of the class than we can just do in an hour or so, then you can always just go to altura.net/academy to do that. So let's get started with persuasion and what it's like and how to do it and how to do it better. So let me start out by saying that anyone who survives to the point in their life where they could come to a webinar like this, you're already great at persuasion. We use persuasion in almost everything that we do to navigate the day, multiple times per day. It's not just when you're negotiating that big business deal. It's really almost all human interactions involve some element of persuasion. It starts very early. There's a guy by the name of Monroe. He created the 5-step motivated sequence, which is how people persuade others to take action. And what I do, I kind of extended that to add a step before his first step, which is attention. Mine is the audience, and then the last one is reward. So just to kind of prove my point that we start very early in this, as you can see, we've got the baby crying in the crib. The very first thing that you have to do with persuasion is get the audience you have to figure out what audience am I trying to persuade. And this happens all the time in marketing. Who's the persona? In this particular case, the baby at some sort of instinctual level, but it's reinforced because it works, knows that there is an audience out there somewhere who can hear him crying in the crib. And that's the attention grabbing thing, is how can he cry loud enough to cause the people in that audience to at least pay attention. There's no persuasion without attention. So that is really where everything begins. Then you have to kind of explain the need. In this case, he needs his sleep, the mom needs her sleep, and that's what he's essentially explaining with his cries. It's for the mom to figure out really how am I going to satisfy this. In our case, when we're persuading someone, we generally can explain how the need of the customer or the need of the person that we're interacting with can be satisfied. And we want to explain that not just in words, but give them a way of visualizing that so that they can almost see they know the before state, they want to see the after state. So we want to give them that after picture of what would it be like if they actually were persuaded to either satisfy their own need in partnership with us or to satisfy some need we have, like we're selling a product. We want their money in exchange for the benefits of the product. So once we've got done with visualization, now we'll call to action. So ultimately, persuasion is about convincing the other person to act in some way that they're currently not acting. If they're going to act that way anyway, there's no persuasion needed. So it's really just about taking them from one current state of behavior to some other state of behavior. And then the last thing that I added here is the reward. So persuasion doesn't end when they act, because almost all times you're going to be interacting with this person again. And when you have multiple opportunities to persuade someone, there has to be a payoff for the prior persuasion experience and the reward. In the case of a baby who needs his diapers changed or just needs to be hugged from mom or needs to be fed, they both get this oxytocin hit. And that's the reward. That's the kind of chemical reward to the brain for this little experience in persuasion that we've all been through, that we've all succeeded at. So we're good at persuasion, maybe even great at persuasion, but it's the thesis of my talk today that you can get better. Um, my bold promise essentially is that you're going to be able to double your ability to get what you need from just an hour, a little bit over an hour of talking about persuasion. That's the breakthrough, kind of equivalent to turning these square wheels into round wheels. It just is so powerful. This happened to me. It's so powerful when you actually understand that there's a science behind this persuasion. It's not just, oh, I seem to be really good at getting people to do what I want. It's more than that. If you understand the science, then you'll be able to leverage those tools to be very effective. Now, there's some people who will tell you, and maybe you're thinking of these naysayers in your mind, or maybe your own voice in your head is saying, well, you can't really double in 1 hour sort of my ability to get what I need. That's not realistic, or it's not going to work on me. I'm kind of, I'm too shy, not assertive enough. I don't, I've never really been able to kind of convince people. I'm not a salesperson. There's a lot of those naysayer voices, and they're always around. Like this cartoon here, there's, what I've done essentially is I've invented a system for being more persuasive. It obviously borrows on what a lot of other people have done, but it's something that can work for you as well. So if you're carrying around like persuasion spears, I can help get you a persuasion Gatling gun and get to the next level of success based on that. As Mick Jagger says, I'll play just one line of this. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, well, you might just find what you need. And that's really the promise of this, our talk today, is that obviously what people want, that's a very big, statement in terms of I can't promise that you'll get what you want, but if you apply these techniques, I can promise that you'll get what you need. So in fact, they're so powerful that we have to be careful, because these can be used for good or ill. The evil aspect of these powers comes from the fact that the same set of persuasion techniques that are so effective in persuading or influencing someone to do something can be used to manipulate them. We have the whole concept of a con man. That stands for a confidence man. Part of persuasion is building trust. So if you have a confidence man that has built up trust, then they're able to persuade things, to manipulate you to do things that you shouldn't do. Those two words are really the key to me, persuasion versus manipulation. Persuasion is when you're influencing someone to do something that's good for them and also good for you. Like if you're selling a product, that's persuasion, because the product in their hands, if it's something that will help them out, is help them do their work better, or solve their accounting challenges more easily, or get to work more quickly on their in their new car, whatever it might be. It has some benefit to them, and it obviously has a benefit to you if you're the salesperson selling it. But if you're selling some kind of snake oil that's going to be bad for the person or not help them in any way, and that, then you're manipulating. So all the same techniques are now manipulation instead of persuasion. And so we want to use these powers that you're going to receive today that enhance the current powers that you have, to be on the side of the good, and not to use them for persuasion. I mean, for manipulation. So why listen to me? So as some of the material that you saw before this webinar started, I have been successful in the past with persuading, the three richest men in the world to give me what I need. And there's techniques that I use that you can learn that will work with the three richest men in the world, but they'll also work with, everyone around you, just like they do for me, friends, family, people that just, businesses that I'm working with, whoever it might be. I've also spent a big chunk of my life not just persuading people, but learning how this persuasion techniques work. And that involves learning from other people. I have two sons, 42 and 37 now, and 6 grandkids. So I have lots of opportunities to learn persuasion skills from them. This is my son on the left. You need to relax more. So I finally figured out how to follow the social proof. That this is one of the examples that we'll get into is social proof. And so, yeah, there's a way to kind of mirror them. Some of the others relate to some of the benefits that you'll get from staying to the end of this discussion. So not only are you going to hear all the persuasion stories about, Jeff and Bill and Steve, you're going to also hear about my own masterclass in persuasion. It's called Tracing Success Patterns. The reason it's called that is because when I was a kid, I had two older brothers, and uh, one of my older brothers, he was an amazing artist, could draw or paint anything. He ultimately got a master's in physics from MIT, and he could take anything apart, put it back together, and not have extra pieces like me. So he's really just a genius in all of those ways. And I'm 5 years younger than him, so it's kind of like being Leonardo da Vinci's younger brother. And so I wanted to kind of impress my mom like he had impressed my mom with his artwork. So I found a picture of a horse, put the paper over it, and just traced the outlines of the horse and kind of filled it in after that and showed it to her. As a sixth grader, I wanted some praise from my mom, and so she gave me that praise. That's when I learned that wow, there's a way to get good at something or to appear good at something when you're not actually good at something, and that's the concept of tracing. And so you just have to identify the success patterns that you want to trace and the failure patterns that you want to avoid. And so that's why I call my masterclass on persuasion tracing success patterns, because what we're really doing is just building on the success of what other people have been able to do. The GEM System Guide for Startups, this is another offering that I provide, which is to help people raise 250K in 3 months, up to $1 million in 5 months. There's a sheet that I'll show you called the 50K per month wealth creation matrix. So if you're looking to kind of change your opportunities to earn significant funds, or even in a business to figure out how to price your product, that's where that comes in. The rest of these things, 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, these are all either books or videos that I can share with you that are really from some of the best brains and minds around persuasion. The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing is about positioning by Reason Trout, best book ever written on that. Donald Miller wrote Building a Story Brand. How to Give a Great Demo. I'm working on that. It really builds on other people's work, though. Influence, we've talked about that. Cialdini, he's the person who wrote the influence thing. He's got some great training videos. And then something called the Wally video, which I encountered about 35 years ago and was really even before I encountered Cialdini, but gave me a sense of, wow, there's a methodology to this that will really work. And then the last part, if you stay to the end, is I've got this tuition for the Altura Academy. It's valued, anywhere from 10,000 to 2,500. But if you stick around to the end, there'll be an opportunity to purchase that for $500 with a 100% money back guarantee. In fact, more than that, if you go through the 1 month training, after you'll get not only your $500 back if you don't like it and go into the second month, but I'll give you an additional $100 just as an added bonus for having trusted me that this will work. So that's what you get at the end. And now I'd like everyone to just do a little experiment, a little task for me here. So how long do you intend to stay in this discussion? We're going to, 10 minutes up to 90 minutes. If you say 10 minutes, it's almost your pastime to leave. 20 minutes would be the shortest version that you could have since we're 15 minutes in. But I really hope that you'll pick the last one there, until I get tired of talking, because I really do want you to double your ability to persuade people. And so if you just take a piece of paper out and either, write whatever number or, check that last box on it, hopefully you've checked this final box here. And I really want that because I really would like to double your ability to be persuasive. So you heard me say because a couple of times in that. So let me start with, this is something from Cialdini, and it's the first one of the first techniques of persuasion. This technique alone will allow you to double your ability to get what you need. It's that powerful. And it's called the fake or real because, and it really is based on the fact that in our brains, humans, we want shortcuts. We don't want to think things through to the end. We're always looking for, okay, I understand what the person's saying. I'm ready to go on to the next thing. And so they did this experiment. This is, when I went to the Air Force Academy, is 1977. Before that, like a week before that, I got to see Star Wars. And so this is the line outside Star Wars, classic blockbuster. And you see that long line of people. And, if I was driving down the road, I might stop. That's another example of social proof, just because there's a long line. But in this case, what the behavioral scientists wanted to prove, that we're interested in understanding persuasion and how the brain works, was what would happen in this situation. So the first person that they tested, they just took a person and had them walk up to the front of the line, and they said, "Can I cut in line?" And of course, most people said no to that, because cutting in line is a major cultural faux pas. You've got everyone in the line who's been waiting there, and then you're going to let someone cut in front of you. You're going to get abuse from anyone who notices that. That's not what they want you to do. So most people say, no, no, you can't cut in line, get in line like all the rest of us did. So the second test that they did was they had someone come to a different person who's now at the front of the line and said, hey, can I cut in line because my 10-year-old daughter got ahead of me and I'm worried about her being in the lobby alone. That's called a real because. And you not surprisingly, almost everyone let the person cut in line because they had empathy for that person, and somehow that outweighed the cultural backlash that they might have gotten from letting someone cut in line. And at least they'd have a good because if they were challenged on it. So most people let that person in. Now, the genius of this test really comes in the third example here, which is they did the same kind of test, and the person said, can I cut in line because, the magic persuasion word, because I'd like to be at this spot in line. Now, almost everyone allowed that person to cut in line. That's called a fake because. So there's no real added information coming in. There's no logic. There's no rationale. The only thing that's different is that it comes after that word because. And the theory is, and I think it turns out to be true in practice, is that if you can weave that because word into your request, then you're going to be way more effective, at least double the level of effectiveness that you're experiencing right now. And if you're doing it ethically, you should come up with a real because. But a fake because works as well. So always have that because. I've started ending almost all my emails where I'm asking someone to do something. Will you come to the webinar? Will you do the X, Y, or Z? Because I think it will have a chance to double your ability to be persuasive, whatever it might be. And so as you listen through the rest of the presentation, you'll notice in different forms that word because surfaces over and over again. So let's talk about one of those persuasion stories. So I'm back in 1997. I've got a startup called Shop.com. And like any startup, I need funding. What I didn't have, I didn't have a functioning product yet. Therefore, I didn't have customers. I didn't have revenue. I didn't have profit. So there's a lot of things I didn't have. But what I did have was an audience with Bill Gates. And so that comes because I knew him from some time before. So that's the first step in those 7 steps, remember, is the audience part of it. So I walked into his office and he says, he's sitting kind of relaxed on his couch. And he says, so, tell me, has me sit down, tell me about your startup. Now, I could have done what probably hundreds of other people have done before when they walk in their office and to talk to them about something, which is to start talking. And I would have been lumped into that same group. Oh, this is some guy who's probably going to ask me for money, or because I'm sure if you're the richest man in the world, you get that request all the time. But what I did instead was get his attention, and I did it by not talking. So I reached over into my bag and I pulled out this encyclopedia thick book it was all the US catalogs were listed and described in this book. And so I just dropped it on the table in front of us, landed with a thud. And so now he kind of leans forward. So now I've got his attention, right? So now it's time for him to kind of like start trying to figure out what this is about. He's a curious guy. So he saw I had written on the side of the book, 15,000 catalogs, $100 billion in revenue. And so he's trying to think. He says, okay, well, that's interesting, but why does this matter to me? I'm the CEO of the world's, biggest software company. E-commerce is just at the very beginning, starting to happen. Maybe there's, some individual e-commerce sites. Maybe Amazon has its version 1 site, just books. And so he doesn't really, know why this should matter to him. He's an operating system company. But then I start working on visualization and to show him why there's a need and why we can satisfy that need. So I opened up the laptop and showed him the one-cart shopping system. This is what I invented, have the patent on, the 2-sided e-commerce marketplace. At that time, you had a cart at every individual website that you went to shop at. And what we were creating, it was called Catalog City, but eventually Shop.com, was the ability to take all these 15,000 catalogs and buy from any of them, put them in one cart, and then check out, that one-cart shopping system. So now Bill, when he sees this, now I see him start to rock. So that visualization and the fact that there's this need that he can understand, that people don't want to go to 50 different sites, and that this solution satisfies it, so he starts to believe it. And then at a personal level, he now sees why he should get involved, because he's an operating system company. These guys are building an operating system for e-commerce. So and the satisfaction for getting involved is that I'm going to ask for investment. And so that is actually the next step, the call to action, the ask. And so I said, he had questions though. And so he stopped me with this one question that was designed to trap me. Now, how I responded would really dictate whether or not the rest of the meeting went well. And so his question was, well, you've got all these catalogs, but you don't have inventory feeds from all these different merchants. So people are going to order things that are out of stock. It's not going to work. That's a challenging question. Now, what I did was appeal to a particular persuasion technique called authority. And authority is related to credibility and trustworthiness. And so the way I demonstrated my credibility on the subject is that I pulled a fact that I knew because I'd studied the domain, which is that 38% of all orders on mail order catalogs at the time were done in writing over the mail. So that if you order the red vest, you don't know that they're out of the red vest when you're placing the order. If it's an 800 number, they can just say, hey, we're out of the red vest, buy a blue one. But if you do it in the mail, you don't have that. So what that meant was the catalog companies either had enough inventory to handle basically all the demand they were going to get, or they had a system for calling back the person and saying, hey, the red vest is out, would you like the blue vest? And the fact that I shared that with them was one thing, but the fact that I used that 38% number, the precision of that number is what shut Bill up and said, okay, yes, Lee, I'd like to invest. He was used to drilling down and getting kind of lame answers to questions, and he got a very authoritative answer to that question. So that appeal to authority was why he invested. So that's the kind of thing that, is one of those elements of persuasion, which once you know it, you can begin to leverage it. And so this is how you can get what you need. What we're going to cover in the rest of the discussion here is a bunch of these success patterns. And so you just have to remember them and trace them. And they're actually not that hard to do. I think probably the doubling of your persuasion ability has already been accomplished by just thinking about one word. Always use that word because. And it's not just about business situations. These also work in health, building healthy relationships with folks. So let's talk about the first one, perceptual contrast. So the reality is that our brains don't have objective ways of measuring things. Everything is subjective. So the way in which our brains work and how we're influenced is related to the order in which things are compared. So if I wanted you to tell me what a basketball weighs, and if I wanted you to think it was really heavy, I would first give you a ping pong ball. If I wanted you to think it was light, I'd give you a bowling ball. And in that order, bowling ball, basketball, ping pong ball, basketball. That changes completely how you feel about the weight of a basketball. And that works in so many different areas of life and we see it all the time. The order in which things are presented is really the key. So here's an example from the Dilbert cartoon. Scott Adams is an expert in persuasion, and so sometimes he puts it in his cartoon and says, "You're fired." Not really. But now this 2% raise won't seem so bad, and this job is all about managing expectations. So that principle of contrast: a terrible event, you're fired, to a modestly good event, 2% raise. So in that interim, the person's brain is stuck in this place where, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if I'm fired? To now the relief of, oh, I'm still hired and I got a 2% raise. This is probably a good day for me. So that ability to deliver bad news by contrasting worse news with reasonable news or the actual news is extremely effective. There's a story which I'll send this at the end of the webinar. I'll send this out, which is about a girl in college trying to let her parents know that getting failing in chemistry might not be the worst thing ever. Other examples of perceptual contrast: if you've ever bought a house, your real estate agent, this is a little bit in the manipulation mode, but she might identify like 3 houses to look at. And the first one is kind of a dump and overpriced. The second one is, again, a dump and overpriced, but the third one is kind of nice home, reasonably priced. It's the one she thought you would buy anyway, but now she's made it seem like a steal. This is amazing. This is compared to what the limited set of comparables and all of that is set up by the real estate agent through this mechanism of perceptual contrast. A similar kind of thing happens in a different way when you're buying something expensive, and then the person sells you add-ons that are not so expensive. So you buy a 40K car. Oh, you want the sound system? It's only $1,000. Now, if you were just with your current car driving around, say, oh, I want a sound system, and someone said it costs $1,000, you say, what? It should be about 200. But because you spent 40K, 1K sounds small. So that's used in a lot of different sales situations. Once you've bought the big thing, well, okay, just a few more add-ons won't cost that much more. And then obviously the discounts, we couldn't go into any Target or any store without saying was $4.99, now $2.99. And all of that is about perceptual contrast. So let's do a little exercise. So think about your current product and what your current target price is. Whether it's a service or, SaaS monthly fee, or it's just a product that you sell, an individual product. And if you're not in the business of selling something, just imagine a situation of something that you've bought, let's say, and bought recently and paid the target price for. So go ahead and fill that in, and then just do the math. And 2 times the target price, 4 times, 6 to 12 times the target price. Those are your tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1 prices. So now, in my case, I sell something called the GEM system, which is for raising money for startups. Now, my target price per month is $2,500. No matter what, I want to make $2,500 a month from selling this. But if I had a price list that just showed $2,500 a month, people would say, "What? You're going to charge me $2,500? What, are you just going to give me advice a couple times a week, and that's going to be enough for me to raise this money? I'm not buying it. Let's have a lower price." So what I do instead is I double that price to 5K, four times 10K, and then 12 times is 30K. And I put them in. This is my invention for how to do price lists that almost everyone can double their average revenue per user by using this price list technique, all because of perceptual contrast. So I always talk about tier 1 first. So tier 1, if you're looking to raise, $1 million, it's 30K per month, 5 times a month, 150K. Effectively committed through that period of time. We guarantee you can raise $1 million to $5 million within that time period. If we don't do it, then we refund 100% money back guarantee. So that tier 1, what I'm establishing with that tier 1 is a couple of things. First of all, I'm not asking for the price. I'm not asking for the business yet. I'm just explaining the price list. It's extremely hard for most people, including myself, to state the price of the product because you're afraid they're going to slap your face. Oh, my cousin could do that on the weekend. I don't need your stupid, service. And that rejection is so painful that we've learned over time to price our product just a little bit above the level at which we can make money or make a profit. And so we end up giving a huge discount to a whole bunch of people that don't even ask for it. We also send a signal that we're in a race to the bottom, essentially, to get, well, my competitor will come under and then I have to come under. And so we're all moving towards the bottom. So in the GEM system, we don't do it that way. So we establish a price that's probably the highest price on the planet for this particular service, because price is a proxy for value. And so by having a very high price, the person says, wow, this must be the best system for raising money that's ever been invented, because it's cost 30K per month. No one else charges that. But it's got this 100% money back guarantee. So, oh my gosh, it must really work, because no one could stay in business if they always had to give 100% of the money back. And so you can see all the work that this one column in the price list is doing for us. This isn't like the 3-tier price list, which goes, home version, small business version, enterprise version, left to right. That's breaking the perceptual contrast. The prices are getting bigger towards the right. You want to flip it around, have the highest price on the left. And it doesn't even matter if no one buys tier 1. People make up in their mind that there are other tier 1 buyers. However, I guarantee you, if you use this approach, eventually someone will show up and they'll want the tier 1 price because they're a tier 1 customer. That's their mindset. They're not price focused, they're value focused. And they say, okay, I want the best chance of getting this done at the level that I want. On the other end, the next thing you talk about is tier 3, 5K per month, 3-month commitment, 15K, guarantee raise 250K to $1 million. If we don't make it, then it'll give a 50% refund. So notice what happens here. So first of all, 5K sounds now like a very small number. And it's still 15K is a small number compared to 250K. These are all perceptual contrast. And a 50% refund, well, that's 50% more than any other provider gives. And at a 50% refund, I'll make $7,500 on those 3 months, which is $2,500 a month. Now, the reality is, when I've done this as part of my business, I've done it 41 times since COVID hit, I've only had to give one refund. So it essentially always works. So the product is actually good, but this is a way of getting value and not having to argue about the value of the product by just leveraging the price list and the power of talking first about the high price before I get to the lower price. This is another service that I offer. It's a mediation service. I want it to be different than every mediation service on the planet so that it's very difficult to do comparables between this and any other things. Because again, we don't want to win a battle on price. We want to win a battle on the uniqueness of our offering and the creating a new category. So everyone else that does mediation, they're essentially fighting over limited goods, and there's like one person that makes it to the top of the mountain and wins. That's typically how it works. Sometimes we're both, neither of us make it to the top of the mountain, and we both feel like losers, but it's how we had to settle the mediation. In my system, we just create two mountains, and so you can have two winners, and that's the model. So by having a unique system, now we can have a unique pricing model. So tier one, basically for $1 million plus kind of deals, my hourly rate's $2,500, daily rate 15,000, 100% money back guarantee if there's no settlement. No other mediation business in the world offers that. And then I added another thing to make extra money, which is 100% times what you paid if both parties are happy with results. So that sets a bar for me. So that's my tier one price. Tier three is for lower size deal. You only get 2 hours of free consulting, $250 per hour, only a 50% refund. So again, I really want people to ultimately be in that tier three, maybe tier two level, but we're establishing the value with tier one. So that's perceptual contrast. Again, that's probably another double if you're in a sales situation at all, you can definitely leverage these price lists. And even if you're not in a sales situation, just leverage the perceptual contrast in your conversations with other people. So next area, reciprocity. So this is one that may not be completely obvious, but there are definitely cultural norms that say that if I give you something, and I give you something again, and I give you something again, you're going to feel increasing social obligation to basically reciprocate and do something nice for me. That's the principle of reciprocity. So an example of that is, we fight for the check at the end of the meal. And if it's a business meal, then some aspect of that is about doing something nice for the other person. So maybe they'll do something nice for you. And that's just one small example of a phenomenon that happens all the time. In the airports, it doesn't really happen anymore that I've seen. It used to be Hare Krishnas would be in the airport and they would want donations. And so they would come up to you and they would put a flower in your lapel or give you a flower into your hand. And then after they did that, after they've given you something, then they would ask for a donation. Of course, the donation that they were asking for was not the 5 cents that the flower cost. It was a couple of dollars or whatever it was. So it's a disproportionate ratio between what they're giving and what the ask is. And that's how con men kind of manipulate this principle of reciprocity. So here's my example in the middle is kind of shows that. This is the creepy guy. I call him the creepy guy. So we got the creepy guy at the bar, and he's offering to buy this woman a drink, and he pulls out his credit card and buys her the drink. Now, if she accepts that, she has created a situation where there's some social obligation that she's going to feel back to this other guy. And the creepy guy, he wants to, if he buys her a second drink and a third drink, by that third drink, she knows she has to do something to kind of give value back for all of this, but she's maybe lost some sense as to what is really proportional. If she at the very beginning, if he had bought her drink, she says, well, let me buy this one for you, and they just traded drinks, that's reciprocity. There would be no sort of leverage in that situation. But if she lets him buy a number of drinks, then who knows what he's going to ask for and what she might feel compelled to comply with. So that's an example of more of the con man kind of approach. Charities, they'll often send out some gift along with their charity request, and it's the reception of the gift. If you can't stop the gift from being received, like you're getting the dollar, you're not going to mail it back to the charity. It's going to have some effect, and they get larger donations and more donations when they send out the dollar bill like this. That essentially, these are in essence elements of that. These small gifts can trigger giving back. The same thing is true when you're negotiating. If you give a concession, then the other person is going to want to give a concession as well. It's one of the reasons why perceptual contrast, you anchor the negotiation high. So address labels, that's another charity trick that they do. They send the Christmas address labels that they used to, and then they ask for a gift coming back the other way. Free samples, that's obviously an example of how people are giving you a gift and then want something in return. Also, you're actually trialing the product, so it has kind of a dual benefit. And then the concession effect, when you anchor, as I was talking about, when you anchor a negotiation, let's say you're buying a car and or actually you're selling a car, and let's say the car is worth 10K, and you say, okay, my price is 20K, and the other person says, no, it's not worth 20K, and then they say, I'll give you 7K, and then you drop it down from 20K to 15K, and they say, okay, well, he dropped down by 3, maybe I have to move up by 3, and now I'm up to 10K. And so, but we still haven't met. So there's those you're just going to continue on that way. So every concession you make, the other person is kind of required to make a similar concession. And as a con man, it's typically not the same connection. I mean, level of concession. So this is an example, a birthday calendar app. So I want to show here how this principle of reciprocity can be woven into a behavior, a situation where you want to change someone's behavior, like to buy your product or to try out your product. So this is an app that my son and I wrote when we started a company. There was a company that generated 500,000 users in 9 hours. And it took me 9 years to get 500,000 users at shop.com. So that was very impressive to me. So I said, okay, let's see if we can build something that would do that. So this is an app on Facebook in the early days of Facebook back in 2006. And so the whole concept of it essentially was that, well, we'll just have 2 screens so people can anticipate when someone's birthday is coming, because Facebook only had a feature where they would tell you on the day of someone's birthday. So we said, well, okay, we'll make this calendar. We'll show everyone's birthday. And we'll also do one more thing. We'll get your top friends, your top 10 friends, and we'll send you a message like 2 weeks ahead of time so that you could actually plan a party or buy them some gift. So that was the idea of the app. So if we'd have just built that app and launched it, we would have a certain amount of usage, and maybe if people liked it, maybe they would tell their friends about it. That would have been that. But what we did instead was we used this principle of reciprocity, and here's how it worked. So during the onboarding, we would ask you for the top 10 friends, and you would not even be able to use the app. You didn't even be able to experience what Birthday Calendar was about until you'd given us all of their addresses, names. And in Facebook, you could then message them. And so we sent a message on behalf of the customer and to all of those top 10 friends. So it read something like this. So Jim, Lee has chosen you as one of his top 10 friends because he wants to receive an alert 2 weeks before your birthday. Here comes the reciprocity. If you want to receive an alert before Lee's birthday, click here to install the Birthday Calendar app and choose him as one of your top 10 friends. So Jim would be basically a complete ingrate if he didn't reply to this, install the app, choose me as his friend. Now, in the process of doing that, he also has to name 10 friends. So there's the viral spread that comes from this one little reciprocity usage. So we added the result of this was we added 2 million users in 14 days. So that was, at the time, Facebook had 40 million users. So that was basically 5% of the entire install base had Birthday Calendar. No advertising, no marketing, other than this one leverage of reciprocity. So just shows how these tools really do work. And it doesn't take, it's not that complex. You just have to think of the idea. So there are 2 key elements there. One, we had people give us their viral list of names before they use the product. That way we could, quote unquote, infect them beforehand. So this is, you think about this as this manipulation versus persuasion. We clearly are manipulating people in some sense, but it becomes persuasion because the Birthday Calendar app is actually a useful app. And so we want them to have that app. And that's where it shifts from manipulation to persuasion. The next one is scarcity. So we all know that when things are scarce, when they become more popular, or at least that adds to their popularity. And so the Beanie Baby craze, all of those types of things, the most expensive cars in the world, because there's only one of them or one in that level of condition, they become extremely valuable. And then there's also phenomenon in marketing where you kind of make not enough of your initial run of products so that they'll be sold out, and then there'll be a lot more people that want the next run, like the Sydney Sweeney jeans that sold out, just in a very quick period of time. They could have made enough so that everyone would have had them, but that would not have created this scarcity feeling amongst everyone. That if they don't get it, they're not gonna. Okay, I can get that anytime I want. Examples, scarcity is especially important when something that you had is removed. So that's the case, the classic Coke case, when they just were going to replace that entirely with new Coke. They had to bring it back because people liked the prior taste, and there were enough people that liked it that they had to change that whole thing. not only scarcity in terms of the product is scarce, like in this beef importer case, people, when they knew it was scarce, they'd order twice as much. It kind of makes sense. Okay, I have to have some on hand in case I run out. But they added another thing, which was to say that that the information that you have is also scarce, and so only a few people know that it's going to be this scarce. And then it was 6 times the order volume, so even increase from there. My favorite example of scarcity is the whole concept of auctions. That entire, the mindset there, eBay used to talk about this, the mindset there is that you won the auction. But if you think about it, the winner of an auction is really kind of a loser because they've essentially paid more for the product than anyone else on the planet thinks it's worth. And so in that sense, they're obviously kind of a loser if you're looking at it from a comparables point of view. So the personal example that I have for this is that when my son was in third grade, their class made the teachers had the class make a dish out of pottery that they glazed and fired and glazed, and every kid's handprint was in it, and all their names were written in glaze. It's sort of like a class of like 15 kids, and so when the parents came in, they said, "Oh, we'll raise money for the class by essentially auctioning this off amongst the parents." So they showed it to everyone. Now, what would you guess it might go for? $10, $50, $200, whatever, some number that's kind of in that realm of reasonableness. Well, as it turned out, there were two moms in the class that really wanted that plate because it had their kids' palm print in it, and it was going to be basically, I guess, a family heirloom. So the bidding went up to $2,000 for this plate. Now, by this time, the teacher in the class is getting a little nervous because you could see how this could create an ongoing feud between those two, and they weren't going to give up. Price was no object at this point in time because it was scarce. There was only one of them. So the teacher was very wise. She says, "Okay, let's end the auction here. It's clear that the two of you really want this. We'll just make a second one, and then each of you can each win the auction, and you can each have them." Now, and that worked, and the money was earned. It was more money than they expected, and everyone walked away of friends, so that was good. But because the scarcity in essence was eliminated. Now, if she'd have said, we'll make 30 of these so every parent can have one, now the two people had bid this up, they would not have been happy about their bids, and they would say, "Okay, well, let's just go, we'll all pay $10 for it then," or whatever it might have been. So if you eliminate scarcity, then it's kind of supply and demand, but that price is going to drop. But the scarcity there was what really drove things. So how did that work with regard to the interactions with Jeff Bezos? So we proceeded with shop.com, and we started building not just our solution, but solutions for other people. And so obviously at that point, Amazon had grown, and they were selling book, music, video, but they had the idea that, well, maybe we want to sell something beyond book, music, video. And so they contacted us. We had seen some of the stuff that they were doing. They were using our site to request print catalogs because they wanted to talk to all these catalog vendors that we already had on our site. So we could tell something was going on there. So we could get an audience basically. So we went up there. Now, I had never met Jeff before. This was our first time, and so I don't really have the same credibility in essence that I had with Bill, and the same ability to that same level of access. So we had to do something else to get their attention. And so what we did was we demonstrated our one cart system. So the top version here of the website, this is how it looked back then, was catalogcity.com, easy access to the world's best products. And so, products, catalogs, gifts, you could search, be like 1,500 catalog merchants at the time, you can find all their products. Only one of the categories was book, music, video. So all these other things where Amazon could start selling immediately. They wouldn't have to put them in inventory. They wouldn't have to figure out how to change the shipping, all the stuff that they ultimately did solve. They wouldn't have to do any of that. They could just basically sign a license with us, and off they went. So we wanted to get their attention. That was kind of like, how could we do it? Well, why don't we take their logo and just skin the site with their logo. It was a little more sophisticated than this. It looked actually halfway like Amazon site already, but it had all these same categories of products. And so we thought that would be the key, that would be enough. to get them to say, okay, this is something that we need to do. We need to make this money. There's fear and greed are two primary motivators in most situations. So we were really going after the greed part of this motivator. But just because we had already built one, and it was another example of the online malls that we could build, these multi-vendor shopping cart malls, we showed them the same thing working. These weren't just skins; these are actually fully functioning sites. The same thing working with eBay's look and feel. Now, it was at that point that the persuasion game kind of started in a different form. I didn't realize that Jeff was also wanting to persuade me of something. I thought I was there trying to persuade him. I knew what I wanted, but I stopped thinking about the implications of what he wanted. So it wasn't showing it on Amazon that mattered. What mattered was showing it as part of eBay, because they knew they were going to build a one cart system. They did not want to have any competition. We were a small company. They could probably live with the level of competition we represented, but they certainly didn't want us licensing our one cart system to other people. So the only way to satisfy his worry of his need for limiting competition was to figure out some way to limit who could get access to the cart. So in his mind, he took Owen Van Natta, Jeff and Owen went off into the corner, and they were kind of talking off to the side. We couldn't hear what they were saying, but I pretty much found out later that what they were saying was that, oh my gosh, if they go to eBay and eBay had only auction price items, variable price, and they give them all these fixed price products, this is going to be terrible for Amazon. So what they were visualizing was, well, what could we do so that eBay would not have access to this, or at least we would have a shot at it before eBay got access to it. And what they came up with was, well, let's invest in shop.com. Now this worked perfectly from my perspective, because Jeff came back to the table, sat down, looked me in the eye, and he says, okay, what do you want? I said, well, we were raising money. So I said, well, we want $5 million for 10% of the company. And so he said yes. And he says, we'll do $5 million in stock, because they didn't want to spend their cash. They were short on cash. So they said, well, we'll spend our stock. Now, if you revert, that was at the time was 855,000 shares of Amazon stock at the price that it was. This was a week after, well, right before, it ended up being basically a week after 9/11 when the stock was valued. And so it was worth $5 million at the time. But today, if I'd held on to all those shares, and it split 20 to 1, in the meantime, there'd be 16 million shares of Amazon stock, a $3 billion investment for 10% of shop.com. I need a time machine to go back and tell myself to margin don't sell, but we ended up selling the stock like 2 weeks later because we wanted the cash. Big mistake. However, what I wasn't paying attention to, because I got my 5 million, I thought I had won the negotiation, was that the other term was a right of first refusal, which means that we could never sell our company to anyone else without Amazon first having a chance to buy it at the same price. And so what that leads to, a right of first refusal, is bad, because no one wants to negotiate and figure out a price for something and then have it just stolen away from them. So it ended up creating a challenge for us, that went on for a number of years. I think it was like a 5-year right of first refusal or something like that. So they basically bought themselves some time versus eBay, because if Amazon had said no to us, our next trip would have been to eBay, and maybe they would have licensed it, and maybe that would have changed how the e-commerce world unfolded. So be careful, when you're negotiating, the other person is negotiating as well. And so even though we had a scarce commodity, the only one cart system outside of what Amazon was building, and they really wanted it, they were able to, without buying it, they were able to control access to it, which is kind of the same thing. So next thing, appeal to authority. We follow people that we know. And people communicate, even though we might not know them individually, we know the category of people that they are. So a policeman dressed like a policeman out there directing traffic asks us to do something. He's got a gun on his hip. He's got the hat, the badge, everything. We're probably going to say yes to them, because that's authority. You say yes to people in authority. And a lot of it is communicated by what they're wearing and the situation that they're in. Now, this other guy, he probably is not going to get our compliance, because he doesn't have any of the signals of authority that we would expect from someone that we're going to follow. So we're not going to follow him. Now, so why does this work? Essentially, again, going back to that shortcut idea, if you have an expert around, then you don't have to think as much. You can just follow someone else's behavior. And those cues, like uniforms, etc., those give us a sense of a, a shortcut for figuring out who is in authority. And so we don't have to like check their credentials or see what police academy they went to and how long they've been on the force. And we don't have to think about any of those things. We just follow the uniform. There's a and so the most effective kind of authority is when you have expertise and you have trustworthiness. And this is why the appeal to authority in the conversation with Bill was so effective, was that I had expertise, I knew that 38% figure, and trustworthiness, I'd already had interactions with him before, where mutual respect on both sides. So that's why that was so effective. So how is this used in different situations? So if you think about a doctor's office, you've got all of these cues that there's the person in authority here. So you got the waiting room, nurses, forms, diplomas, uniforms, stethoscope. All of that leads to compliance to some very personal requests. When I do this course in person, it takes about 4 days, and we go through these examples in a lot more detail. The question I'll ask is: imagine you went to Google and you typed in something and you got a name off of Google, and then you went downtown to the address that was shown there, and you walked in and someone had you fill out a form, and then they directed to your room, and someone showed up and he asked you to take all your clothes off. Now, most people without the context of what I just shared with you would say, well, no, I would never do that. But we pretty much have always all done something very, very close to that when we go to the doctor's office. And we're willing to comply with that personal request because of all of these symbols that are out there. So you want to be careful, because people can fake symbols. There was a tragedy recently where someone assassinated a politician in Minnesota, and he had something that looked like a cop car, and he was dressed in a cop's uniform, and so he basically got entrance to their house because he looked enough like a cop to get them to trust him, even though it was like 11 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning, whatever it was. So be careful about paying. Why am I complying with this person? Is it just because of the way they look? Why do I comply with a celebrity who's endorsing a medication, not because they've taken it, but because they're a role that they played? They played an actor who was a doctor, let's say, and therefore I should listen to them in the medical domain. Makes no sense, but we look at the symbols to kind of drive our examples of authority. So obviously, if you were walking into a plane and the pilots were in civilian clothes, shorts and a t-shirt, and and they're sitting there in the pilot seat, you might be thinking, maybe I shouldn't get on this plane. In addition to that, the power of authority is so strong that if you see them in their uniform and you're up flying, they might come on the speaker and basically say something like, okay, Bill and Sally and Jeff are our flight attendants today. Please listen to them like you listen to me. They're here for your safety, because they're there for your safety. There's a because example. So that they've in essence taken their authority and conveyed it on to other people. And if you're in the exit row and the stewardess asks you if you're gonna help, and you have to say yes, then you have now a level of authority over the other passengers, because you're the ones who are responsible for that part of getting out of the plane. So those are examples. Now let's talk about the Steve Jobs example, and I'll come back to that page in just a minute. But before we get there, one of the other things that we go through in the persuasion at the Altura Academy is this concept of conflict resolution, which is an area of getting what you need. It's not just about conflict resolution. These same elements of these things exist even if you're not in a real conflict, But let's talk about when someone wants to sue you. So there's things that you can do, or some other kind of conflict. In the course that I teach in person, we talk about the last time you were in a physical fight, which leads to lots of interesting discussions about when was the last time you got beat up or you beat someone up. Those are the kind of conflicts, maybe it was in a bar, maybe it was in the schoolyard somewhere. A lot of us has faced that kind of physical confrontation. So what could we do at that point in time? So one type of thing to do, which is probably what you should do in most physical situations like that, is the best you can do is just avoid it, walk away. Run, hide, fight is what they say in the school shooter drills. You want to just get away from it. Negotiation, that's something that can work. That we do that a lot in our families. We're negotiating around conflicts. That's probably the typical way most conflicts are resolved. If it goes to another level, mediation. So divorce is sometimes done through mediation. Now you have a third party who is basically facilitating the negotiation and who is neutral party and is just really there to help each party hear each other and navigate the concessions, the give and take of trying to, like I talked about earlier, each arrive at a new summit, each have their own summit, and to make it up to the tops of those summits so that they can move on with their lives beyond that conflict. Arbitration is a little different. That's when a lot of contracts have an arbitration clause. In those situations, there's a third party who has actual legal power to cause, they do kind of like a mediator, but then they use their own personal judgment to decide, okay, here's a fair resolution. Each side gets, you get the house, you get the pets or whatever it might be. And now that person is going to say you have to follow that. You don't get to just decide. With mediation, if you can't get a settlement, the parties just go back to the other ways in which they can fight. Maybe the next step would be litigation. This is Now there's a third party in the form of the judge or the jury who's going to decide who's right or wrong and how it's going to get resolved. Now, as it escalates, if litigation isn't a choice, and you get some people jump all the way from number one to number six, which is self-help. So if you have an issue, then you just fight it out, or you boycott or violence or threats, protests, whatever it might be. And then the last one is request for help and appeal to higher authority. So this is like you're on the schoolyard and you're getting ready to fight someone, and then you call your older brother who can kind of settle things down because they have a more authority over that person you're getting ready to fight with. So here's an example that happened in my life relative to this. So when Steve Jobs, they famously, obviously everyone knows, they came out with the Macintosh January of 1984. This is what it looked like, and black and white only. And they had this nice hello, and that was kind of how they launched the entire thing. So at that time, I was at Digital Research and had left Xerox, where we did some of the early graphical user interface that they had stolen actually from Xerox, which is where I worked. But then I went to work for Digital Research, and we created something called the GEM desktop, graphic environment manager. And we had some advantages. One, it was on the IBM PC, which are a lot more PCs than there were Macintoshes back then. Two, we could do color. They could not do color. And three, we could kind of leverage the user experience that they've done and kind of build our own version of those things, not quite as pretty as theirs. So we launched an ad that basically looked like this. And instead of hello, just to really rub their nose in it, we just said hi, which is even more friendly than hello. And so Steve was furious that we had come out with this. He didn't want there to be anyone else that had a graphical user interface. And if we'd shown the desktop here, just like the Macintosh had a trash can in the bottom right-hand corner, we had a trash can in the bottom right-hand corner. So they sent their lawyers and Guy Kawasaki and a couple of Jean-Louis Gasset, a couple other people down to Digital Research to threaten the lawsuit. And they explained all the things why we were stealing from them, et cetera. And they're a bigger company than us, and they were going to sue us. And so we were thinking, well, how are we going to deal with this? What can we really do? We could just we can't really avoid it. We could have negotiated something like, okay, well, we'll change everything about the site, but that would have kind of ruined the advantage that we had in the market. They didn't want to mediate. There was no arbitration clause because we didn't have an existing contract with them. So litigation was kind of where they were headed and where we didn't want to go. So we couldn't really use self-help because, we couldn't go like boycott Apple. I guess we could have tried something in the press to try to just kind of make them seem like the bad guys or whatever, but nothing that can't throw rocks at the Apple headquarters. So we couldn't really resort to any of those self-help measures. So what we did was we appealed to a higher authority. So it turns out the CEO of Digital Research, a guy by the name of Gary Kildall, and a number of years before, he had created or Apple had requested something called the CP/M card, which was a card that went into the Apple II and ran Digital Research's CP/M operating system. So at that time, Gary Kildall and Steve Jobs were working together, and they said, okay, let's agree that we're never going to sue one another over anything. And they made that agreement. And so when we said, hey, Gary, they're trying to sue us over this, Gary said, okay, well, let me make a call. And he called Steve, and Steve backed off, and that was the end of it. So that's a sort of an example of calling, the person with actual authority to get to the next level. Consistency. So we are what we say and do. So there's a lot of life that's designed to take these small steps over time, which the cumulative effect of those are to is such that we want to stay consistent with that. The example that I chose here is like we learned from early days of school, pledge allegiance to the flag. That builds an innate builds a sense of patriotism in children as they grow up, so that when they're 18 and they get recruited to join the military, they're already this is consistent with what they've done kind of throughout their life up until that point. Now, if their entire school experience had been, bad mouthing the United States and talking about all the ways in which we're terrible, then the chance that they will ultimately want to fight and die for the United States is going to be much lower, because that wouldn't be consistent with their actions. So consistency works because we essentially don't like to, it's a type of shortcut again. If we say yes to something and yes again and yes again, it just seems to go with that. When we think about the example that I gave about how long are you going to stay in this discussion, and I had you, fill out this form and check the ones that you seemed appropriate. I wanted you to take that physical action of actually writing those things down, and so that you would stay until this point in time. So we're 60 minutes in, so hopefully you'll stick with me for another 15 minutes or so. So consistency. So one of the reasons that it works, and that was a sort of written pledge in essence. And then if we'd have been in person, I'd have had you show it to everyone else, so you'd have the visible part, and it'd be uncoerced, so you decided what it was. So that makes it very sticky. And so those are all examples of how consistency works. And here's some examples from that Cialdini talks about. So the first one is, when people were making reservations and then the restaurant doesn't want them to be a no-show, or if they are going to be a no-show, they want to hear about it so that they can book, someone else can get the table. So the people, when they were making reservations, they would say something at the end like, please call if you need to cancel. If they did that, 30% of the people did not show up and did not call. And so this was a big problem. And so they said, well, what can we do to fix this? And what they came up with, the influence experts that they spoke with, was, why don't you make it work like this? Say, will you please call if you need to cancel? And then pause on the phone. And everyone, of course, says yes, because that's what you do when someone asks a question like that, a courtesy question, and pauses. And so once they did that, then the number of no-shows dropped, and it basically almost always people actually called. So all just because we made it easier for them to maintain consistency with their prior actions by actually calling. Or onboarding procedures. So this happens. The example I chose here is that when someone wants you to fill out a survey and volunteer or give them a donation, they'll stand at the front of the grocery store and say hi. And then they do a very interesting thing. They give you the clipboard, or they'll have the clipboard right there and give you the pen. And if you accept that pen or clipboard, then they'll say, well, just check the boxes of how you feel about this. And then they'll flip over the page, and then they'll be, and would you mind signing this petition? Now, to be consistent with your prior check marks, you'll want to sign that petition. And then they'll turn it over one more time and then say, well, are you open to being a volunteer, or, helping us with doing these surveys at other grocery stores or whatever it might be. And so all of these are designed to be a little bit higher level of commitment, and then following through on that. If you think about this in life, you have dating, getting engaged, getting married, so more and more levels of commitment. Each one sort of sets the stage for the next one. Duolingo, you have the concept of streaks. You want to stay consistent with all the work that you've done prior to that. So that's consistency. Social proof, we got two more after this. So social proof, when in doubt, look around. So like I talked about at the very beginning with the line of people outside of the Star Wars blockbuster movie, if you were driving down the street and you showed a restaurant with a ton of people wanting to get in and then one that's completely empty, you're probably going to pick the one that's busy, because all these people probably know better than you, and so you'll just trust their judgment. A similar thing happens like on Netflix. They have the top 10 shows in the United States. Now, why exactly first of all, do we even know that these are the top 10 shows, or that's just what's listed on our TV? Because maybe they make more money from one show or the other, or whatever their reasons might be. But we trust them that these are the top 10 shows. And because we trust them, we're sort of trusting the judgment of all our peers around the country. And therefore, maybe we pick, one of the top 10 shows. And all of that is an example of social proof. Social proof is all around us. You can make it work better or worse by a couple of factors. So if there's a lot of people, that's almost always effective. That's kind of the mob rule a little bit. That basically, if a lot of people are running for the exits, even if you don't know why they're running for the exits, you're probably going to run for the exits. Or another situation, if everyone that's similar to you is doing something, like if you're, let's say you're attending a play, and then people that are, all the older people in the audience decide to get up and start walking out, you're much more likely to follow them, and the younger people in the audience may not be as likely to follow them. Oh, that's just the old people walking out. They're offended by something in the play. So you want to have similar people and a lot of them. That's the best way to get social proof working for you. If something's going wrong with you, like a health issue or something like that, and you have a bunch of people standing around, oh, why is he having trouble breathing or whatever it might be? Um, what you want to say is, hey, you in the green jacket, um, call 911 and help me out. And by making it just that one person, then the whole group doesn't have an excuse. Because otherwise, like, oh, someone should help them, but I'm not the right person. But when you call that one person out, then that person starts acting, and then someone else will begin to act, and someone else will begin to act, and pretty soon you got the whole crowd, trying to help you. So you want to get one person moving in the right direction, and then build on that, and build on that momentum essentially. And social proof is a lot about momentum. Um, the examples of this, there used to be on call to action in this infomercial. It was working reasonably well. They were saying operators are standing by or operators are waiting. But then they changed it. They said, if our operator is busy, please call again. That was a much higher and more effective response to the infomercial, because it communicated that, hey, a lot of people must be ordering because the operators might be busy. I better call, and maybe they'll all be ordered by the time I call. So that's scarcity. So you can see how these things begin to combine to be more effective. We talked about Netflix, other people like this item, all very common things. And then Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, we are influenced. Oh, this is a video worth watching because a million other people used to watch or have been watching that. There's a phenomenon where no one wants to go to a party, to be the first one to go to a party. You want other people to already be at the party. Of course, you have to, like, that's a challenge, right? Because someone has to be first and someone's there before everyone else. And that's a lot of marketing, is getting that momentum, figuring out how to get those initial users into an experience. So social proof. So this is this is actually going to be something where I kind of pull together a lot of the different persuasion techniques that have been discussed so far. This relates to fundraising. So this is not typically how fundraising is done. The normal way is, hey, we've got our company, we're raising, 500K at a 5 million post-money valuation. Here's our safe. Please sign up. But that misses the chance to leverage all kinds of persuasion signals in what I would view as the last slide in the pitch deck. This is called a phase fundraising chart. I invented this based upon these persuasion principles as a better way to raise money, especially for early stage startups with limited traction. So we show all of the round. Fundraising is about storytelling, momentum, and scarcity. So storytelling, we show all the rounds of funding. We don't list things like, pre-seeds, seed, Series A, Series B, some kind of exit. Those don't tell you sort of who is likely to invest. And we're trying to communicate to someone. So we want them to be with their group. We want them to be similar to others. And so we name the groups as we go across. And we also tell the story of how the valuation is going to increase, 2.5 to 5 to 10 to 50. So you can see the perceptual contrast here. We're getting in at a low price, then the value is going to go up. It's going to go up 2x, going to go up 5x. And so that's a momentum play where the valuation going up, we want to be from a low valuation to a high valuation, because the high valuation is where we're going to exit. That's the best end of the scale to be on. So we're willing to start with low valuation. So we told the story from a valuation point of view. Now the funding side. So we want to show momentum. So we need some money. So we're raising here 250K at a 2.5 million post. Then we're going to use that money to accomplish some things. And then after we've accomplished those things, because we've accomplished those things, we'll step the valuation up here. And I would be talking exactly this way to potential investors. So you're starting to hear the persuasion elements that come in. So if you invest here, we complete these things. Because we do that, now we step the valuation up to here. Now look at the momentum and the consistency. So this round is actually closed. So now here's the new round. Now if you were raising 500K, more stuff to do. Because we do that, then the bump the valuation up to 10, raise some more money, do some more things. Because we do that, bump the valuation up to 50. So now all of a sudden, this chance to get in at 5 million, that's a 10x step up by the time it gets to here. That's starting to sound like a pretty good deal. Now we got to get them to invest now. So scarcity is the third thing after storytelling and momentum. So we set a date range, and then we break the amount up. Over here, we broke it up into 10 1% slots. So 25K buys 1%, nice, simple. And then the second check comes in, the first check, the second check, the third check. By the time the third check comes in, now we have they basically fall like dominoes, because there's this massive social proof within the round, and there's also scarcity. So we have only so many more slots left, and if I don't act now, I might miss out on it, and then I'll be paying twice as much in this round. So the fear of missing out, the greed that I want to get in before the price goes up. Here we broke it up into 5 1% slots and then 1 5% slot, again showing scarcity. And then the social proof on the other side is that although this round hasn't even happened, these are potential investors down the road that will come after me, that will help justify the progress that's been made and the valuation that I paid. So all of these elements, just to kind of go through them a little bit, the things highlighted in bold here, these are the elements of persuasion, and these are kind of what was done. So showing all the rounds, past, present, future. This is thinking past the sale. So we're showing the present valuation, but we're also showing the future valuation. And the principal contrast is also in play here. A car salesman, when they're selling a convertible, they won't talk about how the convertible looks here in the showroom. They probably won't even talk about how it looks just out on the road. They will paint a picture so that you can visualize. Imagine you're driving along the beach. You've got your significant other in the car with you. It's a beautiful day, tops down. Hair is blowing in your wind. Your hair is blowing in the wind. That's thinking past the sale. You don't even own the car yet, and they've got you driving down the beach with your significant other. So that's an example of thinking past the sale. The way we do it is we're talking about these future valuations at the same time that we're asking for this current valuation. And we also talked about the past. So it's like, oh, someone missed out. I missed out. I better get in now. All the stepwise valuation, not only it's perceptual contrast, but it's also anchoring the valuations. We don't ask someone else to value the company. We set the value and then find investors who agree with that value. And then because they're nice multiples, it's easy to say, oh, 2x, 5x, 10x, my valuation number. Raise 10%, that's short and simple. That use of because at the end of each of we're going to do these things, and because we complete them, we'll step the valuation up. That's a real because. Time constraints, that's a reason to push to close. We show the investors in each round that safety in numbers, both the prior rounds, the current round, and the subsequent rounds. Scarcity, there's only so many slots left. Social proof comes when the first investor comes in. And then being candor, trust, and humor. Usually I'll say something like, startups are extremely risky investments. Most of them fail, like 99% of them fail. So invest what you can afford to lose and have a stay friends. Value the friendship more than the funds. When you admit the negative, it's one of the 22 mutable laws of marketing is the law of candor. When you admit the negative, they'll give you the positive. And then the last one that we're going to cover here is liking. So we have we tend to say yes to people that we like. Now, obviously, this is leveraged on TV because we pick celebrities that are naturally likable and have them tell us about the products that they. Now, why does Jennifer Garner and Charles Barkley? Why do they know about what credit card is the best? Well, obviously they don't. And in our brain somewhere, we know they're being paid to say good things about these products, but they're just likable people, and so we want to do stuff that they ask us to do. This is a challenge really for anyone in sales, is you want to establish shared interest. And if you want to do it, not like a con man where it's a bunch of fake things, you really want to just be a little bit of a detective and say, oh, you went to the I don't know, Naval postgraduate school. My dad was in the Navy as well. Or, oh, you love to play golf. I live near Pebble Beach. I play all the time. You're finding connection points so that you're more likely to like one another. People obviously like people that are like them as well. So sports team jerseys, we all kind of are ready to get together in the parking lot for a tailgate just because we're wearing the same jersey. a salesperson who wants to manipulate this, if they're trying to sell you a car, maybe there's a golf bag in the back of your current car, and then when the salesperson comes into the sales room, he'll say, oh yeah, I'm getting ready to go golfing this week, and the person will say, oh really, I golf too, you know. Now the salesperson already knew they golf, but he just wants to elicit that connection. And the other way to build to build get someone to like you is with praise. And so praise always works. You want to spot true strengths. So for instance, I appreciate everyone's commitment to sticking to the end. We're almost there. I really do praise you for that. So if you know one of the best books ever written on persuasion is called the One Sentence Persuasion Course. People will do anything for those who they like, but for those who encourage their dreams, justify their failures, allay their fears, confirm their suspicion, help them throw rocks at their enemies. This is used at massive scale. I mean, at the country and world level scale. There's an example. This is this cartoon influenced by Scott Adams called The Mouth That Roared, the mystic music of the Mar-a-Lago man. No matter what you think about Trump, we have to admit that he is one of the world's most persuasive people ever, because not only was he initially elected with no career in politics, but after a single day that would have been disqualifying for anyone else, he was elected again. And so he's an extremely persuasive person. Now, well, how does he do it? Well, Miracle Max is his advisor, and he suggested that he read this One Sentence Persuasion course to get people to do what he wants, basically. And so how does it work? Well, we've got encourage their dreams, justify failures, allay their fears, confirm suspicion, help them throw rocks at the enemy. So what did he do? This is written back before his first term, actually. So encourage their dreams. We will win again. Make America great again. Justify their failures. Okay, China stole your job. It wasn't that you were bad at your job or you picked the wrong industry or anything like that. No, China stole your job. You know, allay their fears, we'll destroy ISIS. So we've got this fear is a big motivator. You know, there's terrorists out there that could be blowing stuff up. So we're going to destroy those guys. Confirm their suspicions. Now, there's some part of the population that, well, these illegal immigrants, they must be causing the crime. They must be the reason I don't have a job. They must be the ones at fault. And then help them throw rocks at their enemies. The media and the elite are losers. And so will this work? Well, it did work. So that all goes back to the power of persuasion, is that, you know, it can get you elected president. It can get you to be successful in just about every domain. Individual product offerings, they typically don't employ all of these at one time. You know, there's a lot of things that are sold to encourage their dreams. When you're selling insurance, a lot of insurance sales pitches are based upon allaying their fears. So there are ways to leverage these kind of one by one, that just to market any product. So let me ask you a question. Was this too fast? Do you want to learn more? Is there a way to get to apply this even more effectively in your life? The answers are yes. So there's kind of do it yourself. I'm going to send you all the material I shared today and the underlying and a link to a site where you can get additional material that'll be useful in your persuasion journey. That's the do it yourself version. The do it together version is just go to altura.net /academy and attend the group classes. At the bottom of that site at altura.net /academy, you'll see my price list for that. And so tier 1 pricing is $2,500. You're in a group class, but it's only 4 people. You get 8 hours of individual coaching, and for whatever your persuasion challenges are, 100% money back guarantee. And if you don't go into the second month. Now, tier 3 is $500 per month. You heard me mention that at the very beginning. It's a larger group class. You get 1 hour of coaching, but there's no refund. So that's the normal offer. And so that's what I usually use when people are joining the Altura Academy classes. But because you're here today, I'm offering 2 things. One is if you go and sign up at the altura.net /academy, just pick the tier 3. There's a button at the bottom of the page of that. Just pick that button and go ahead and pay your $500. And then if at the end of that month you haven't been so impressed by how much you like the class that you decide to not enroll for the second month, then you get 100% of your money back plus $100 as a bonus for taking the class and sticking with me through that. In that class, we'll learn about the $50,000 wealth creation matrix, and how to leverage empathy and experience during the process of raising money, if that's part of what you're doing. So I appreciate everyone's attention throughout this. I think that there's, going back to the original promise that I made, which is right here. I believe that you will agree that these techniques do represent a breakthrough, and if you apply them, you'll much more than double your ability to be persuasive.